When you hear the name Yorktown, Virginia, one thing probably comes to mind, right? The end of the American Revolution. But what if I told you that one famous event is just scratching the surface of a much deeper, more complicated story buried in that very same soil? Let's dig in.
So what you're looking at here are the reconstructed siege lines at Yorktown. This is the spot. This is where, back in 1781, a massive victory secured American independence. But that victory, as huge as it was, is really just our starting point. We're going to peel back the layers of time here and uncover a few other stories that are just as crucial to understanding what this historic ground is all about.
All right, first things first. Let's set the stage with the story we all probably remember from history class. The incredible military campaign that literally cornered the British and won the war.
So, the big question is, how did the British Army get itself stuck in Yorktown in the first place? Well, it all kicks off in April of 1781. Lord Cornwallis marches his army into Virginia, totally convinced that if he can control Virginia, he can win the whole war. By May, he's got a force of over 5,000 troops. Now, the American side is led by the young Marquis de Lafayette, who has a much smaller army. He knows he can't win a direct fight, so he plays this brilliant game of cat and mouse, just constantly shadowing the British. The really crucial move comes in August, when Cornwallis gets orders to move his entire army to the little port town of Yorktown to set up a defensible naval base.
And this map, wow, it really shows you that deadly dance they were doing across Virginia. You can see Cornwallis's path, the dotted line, pushing deep into the state. And then there's Lafayette's path, the solid line, just constantly moving, always trying to stay between the British and the critical American supply lines up north. Every single move on this map is leading to one place, that tiny peninsula at Yorktown.
And all of that maneuvering, all that strategy, it all leads to this moment. After a 3-week siege by the American and French armies, and, this is key, a French naval blockade that cut off any escape by sea, Cornwallis was trapped. He had no choice. On October 19th, he surrendered. This was it. This was the moment that basically guaranteed the United States would be its own independent nation. But here's a question. Whose freedom was really won on that day?
And that question, well, that takes us to the next layer of our story, because fighting right there alongside the Continental Army were men who were battling for a kind of freedom the new nation wasn't quite ready to give them.
You know, this is where things get really complicated. You've got the incredible, soaring words of the Declaration of Independence on one hand, and then you have the hard reality on the ground. A country fighting for liberty where hundreds of thousands of people were enslaved. And it wasn't just a southern thing. Even up in a northern state like Rhode Island, more than 5% of the population was enslaved.
And that huge contradiction brings us to this number, which is, honestly, it's just staggering. By the fall of 1778, more than 60% of the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, and this was a unit that fought with incredible bravery at the Siege of Yorktown, was made up of free and formerly enslaved black men. This was not an accident. It was the result of a really radical, though pretty imperfect, policy.
So how did this happen? It was because of something called the Slave Enlistment Act. The Continental Army was desperate for soldiers, so Rhode Island passed this law. And it promised immediate, absolute freedom to any enslaved man who signed up to fight. Now let's be clear, it was deeply flawed. It still treated people like property by paying off their enslavers, but it opened a direct path to freedom for hundreds of men.
I mean, just try to put yourself in the shoes of someone like Cadardo Wanton. He was an enslaved laborer who actually managed to get his own freedom. And then, he chose to enlist. He chose to join the army. For him and for all the men in the 1st Rhode Island, the fight at Yorktown wasn't just about America's freedom. It was about their own.
Okay, so we've got soldiers fighting for these grand ideals and for their own personal freedom. But what about the regular people, the civilians caught right in the middle? For them, it was just about survival. Let's look at our third layer and see how this war shattered their lives.
So this guy, Lieutenant General Earl Cornwallis, he rolls into Yorktown, and he needs a place to set up shop, a headquarters. He picks the biggest, nicest brick house in town, which happened to belong to a local big shot named Thomas Nelson. People called him Secretary Nelson. And just like that, for Secretary Nelson, the war had literally walked right in his front door.
And for poor Secretary Nelson, his nightmare was just getting started. First, his home is taken over by the enemy. Then, on October 9th, the American and French forces start bombarding the town. Fiery cannonballs start ripping through his roof, smashing into the walls of his own house. It gets so bad that his nephew, who just so happens to be the governor of Virginia, had to ask for a temporary ceasefire. So on October 10th, the 65-year-old Nelson, who's suffering from gout, literally has to hobble across an active battlefield to get to safety, leaving his home behind to be completely destroyed. It's an unbelievable story of the price civilians paid.
So we've got this amazing story of a nation's birth, this powerful story of personal liberation, and this heartbreaking story of civilian sacrifice. But believe it or not, that's not the end of it. The ground at Yorktown has one more story to tell, and it is a wild one.
81 years. That's it. Just 81 years after that famous surrender, the sound of cannons was heard in Yorktown once again. The very nation that was born there was now trying to tear itself apart.
It's almost unbelievable when you put them side by side like this. Fast forward to 1862, the Civil War is raging, and what happens? Another massive army. The Union Army this time, under General George McClellan, lays siege to Yorktown. The tactics were so similar it's spooky. A long, drawn-out siege against a fortified line. The outcome, though, that was different. Instead of a big surrender, the Confederate Army just slipped away in the middle of the night.
But here's the detail that just blows my mind and ties it all together. During that 1862 siege, the Confederate soldiers actually used and built upon some of the exact same trenches that Cornwallis's British Army had dug 81 years before. History wasn't just rhyming, it was literally building on top of itself.
So, what does this all mean? It means when we look at Yorktown now, we can't just see one single event anymore. We have to see a place of layered triumphs, deep, deep contradictions, and these kind of haunting echoes through time.
So when you put it all together, you realize Yorktown isn't just one simple story. It's a symbol of a nation's birth, absolutely. But it's also a powerful testament to Black soldiers fighting for a freedom that was much more personal and profound. It's a brutal reminder of the terrible price civilians pay for war. And it's just this stunning, kind of eerie example of how history can sometimes repeat itself on the exact same stage.
And this really just leaves us with one final thought. Yorktown is a powerful reminder that the ground under our feet is never just one thing. It's like a manuscript that's been written on, erased, and written on again by different people in different times. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other layers of history are lying right beneath the surface of the places we think we know?